I I think the one, if we're going to have one that embodies this whole concept, that you were right there, you have not gotten to where you want to be quite yet, but now you've done the things that have set you up. And if we look at the eligibility of the players on the team, now would be the time to do it. I think it's Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Ole Miss because this is a team that would have made the 12-team playoff last year, but still had the same issues that the Lane Kiffin teams of the past have had. They lost to Nick Saban's Alabama. They lost to Kirby Smart's Georgia. That has to change for them. They have to be able to beat one of those teams to get where they're going. And so we look at the schedule this year. I actually think they can make the playoff without beating Georgia, JD, but I don't even think just making the playoffs enough, given what they brought in. Like, this team needs to make the playoff and make some moves in the playoff based on the talent on the roster.
Yeah, the pieces they got through the portal, like you said, it feels like Lane Kiffin, as he put this whole thing together, had an eye towards beating a Georgia, or beating an Alabama, or whatever, those big boys in the SEC. The defensive line with Princely Uman-Mielen and Walter Nolan, we've beat that dead horse senseless on this show, Andy, talking about those specific players. You pair him with Jared Ivey. So I think you're right, though. I think there is enough juice from last year paired with the guys that came back, paired with the portal guys we just mentioned, to where you start looking at, okay, well, who could we draw in that first round if you end up being the 5 seed, or you end up being a 6 seed and you draw a favorable matchup? You're like, all right, well, if we go out there and we lose to, insert whatever G5 school or lower level power conference school you want into that blank, like, is that a success? And we talked about it, I think, when you were here in Nashville. It's that whole give a mouse a cookie syndrome. It's like, last year you would have been happy to win a New Year's Six bowl. Well, now you got a cookie, you want some milk. Now you want to make the playoff and you want to win a game, and then X, Y, and Z after that. So I do think that the situation they're in right now is fascinating, where if they have success at a high level and they do win a playoff game, I know Lane Kiffin's a portal guy. I understand that's the bread and butter, but do we maybe see that elevate the high school level a little bit, where they don't have to lean quite as heavily on the portal, and maybe they can have a little bit more of the homegrown talent they're able to add to that roster? Just saying, maybe make it a destination. Yeah.
I do think that's possible, because you've got to be in that mix. You've got to be seen year after year in that mix to be on that list. And look, we've seen Ole Miss do from a collective standpoint. They've done a great job going out in the portal, getting guys, but they've also done a great job retaining the good players on their own roster. And I think the other thing we were talking to Pete Nakos about, when we did our survey of some of the top class of 2025 guys about NIL, one thing we noticed is the dollar figures for the freshmen have kind of flattened out. So the freshmen are actually cheaper than some of these really good portal guys they've been getting. So going forward, you do kind of want to invest in some of those maybe a little bit lower cost investments that could pay dividends down the road. But you mentioned the juice that they've got going. How about Juice Wells?
Yeah.
Like, at health, if Juice Wells is healthy, Juice Wells and Trey Harris together will make that running. I know this is strange. I'm talking about two receivers and how they're going to affect the running game, but it will make that running game fairly easy for Ole Miss. They're going to be running into light boxes, and this is what they have to do if they want to beat a team like Georgia, because they have to make Georgia respect the pass game, but they also have to be good enough up front, which it seems like Ole Miss has gotten better up front, that you can block. Like, let's say Georgia's going to go with a fairly light box. Let's say they're not bringing pressure. Your 5 have to block their 4 still. And like last year, if you watch that game, Ole Miss's 5 were not blocking Georgia's 4.
No.
It wasn't happening.
No.
They have to be able to do that. Now, we look at the schedule. Do they have to beat Georgia to make the playoff? No. I do think they have to win at LSU. I think the at LSU game for Ole Miss this year is probably the linchpin game, because they haven't beaten LSU in Baton Rouge since 2008. And it's just been a house of horrors for them. I don't know if it's some sort of juju thing, if it's like, when Tennessee goes to Gainesville. I don't know what the deal is there, because they've had some good teams that have gone in there that were probably better than the LSU team they were playing, and it just hasn't worked out. But they got to win that game, because one, if if they win that game, it's huge because it's the first time since 2008. But also, if they can't win that game, they're going to take some other losses along the way that'll keep them out of the playoff.
The other two games that had my attention on that schedule, Andy, is we had it up there. Oklahoma, can't drop that one. New to the SEC, you got to get that one, especially the week after LSU. Classic letdown spot. And then another letdown spot. Could we be in a world, Andy, where Ole Miss is sitting at 9 wins, heading to the Swamp, and they got to go play a Florida team, which who knows what they're playing for at that point in the season. But, I mean, we've seen many a good team walk into Gainesville and not come out the same or not look the same when they hit the field in Gainesville. So that's one that I think if you're sitting at 9 wins, you need to get to 10. I think we kind of agree that if you get to 10-2, that's probably about what you need to get to the playoff or at least have a fighting chance. Those are the two big swing games I'm looking at, in addition to the LSU game you mentioned.
So I don't know what happened with my headphones that we were talking about before the show, but I missed all of what you just said. But I agree with everything you just said.
Phenomenal.
JD,
Phenomenal.
I am sure that you are 100% correct on all that. Now, so let's talk about it because this is now or never. So we can't just focus on the positive and what happens with, what they can do. What happens if they don't? What happens if they don't? Like, where are they at? Because we keep saying, okay, Lane Kiffin's going to break through. Lane Kiffin's going to break through. What if they don't break through this year?
I think if they don't break through, it's a failure. And I think that's a little bit harsh as we sit here in June, but I think it would be a failure for the folks at Ole Miss because of what we just mentioned. They've built to a season like this. They went all in the portal. They bring back Jackson Dart. And I think the big thing for me is like when you look at the rosters that Ole Miss has on the schedule compared to what they have in-house, like they really probably should be at least a 9-win football team. Like you said, LSU's tough, Georgia's tough, but it's like if you handle business and take care of the games you're supposed to take care of, like Ole Miss, you should be at least 9 wins and fighting to be in that 10-win range. You get to 10 wins, we talked about, you're probably in the college football playoffs. So like it's all teed up. There's no more like, oh, what's Ole Miss going to be? We know what Ole Miss is going to be. It's how good can they be with a really high floor going into 2024.
Ryan Willing says it won't be a failure because they've never experienced great success. I disagree with that. I think they've taken, they were kind of on the steps, like you're just walking up the steps, and they've taken these various steps that, basically from when Lane Kiffin took over for Matt Luke, they've gone up a step, up a step. So now it's time to ascend that staircase just a little bit more.
I really think, especially there's different teams we could talk about here, but I think just because you haven't reached a certain level of success in college football doesn't mean you can't expect success in the future. And my big thing is like input equals output in college football. Like people were dogging A&M because they hadn't achieved X, Y, and Z in the past. But I'm like, y'all, they're putting everything plus their heart into it. Like they're having everything that you're supposed to do on paper to get success at, the highest level. Like, yeah, they can expect something when you put in the work to eventually get there. And I think Ole Miss, not to say they're the same as A&M at this point in time. Maybe that's a poor example comparing these two SEC teams. But based on what they did in the portal, based on who they brought back, the input is all there to get a really exciting output for the folks in Oxford.
I think that's the right way to put it. And I do think that the schedule sets up nicely for them. So now we're just going to see, can they do it? And, I had a question to Dear Andy about should the person put a future down on Ole Miss to win the SEC? I was like, look, if they beat Georgia in the regular season, they're going to Atlanta.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of a coin flip away from winning your bet. So, and it's funny because that I looked at FanDuel on that one, JD, and Ole Miss's odds to win the SEC are actually better than Alabama's.
That is crazy. That is crazy. If you told me that this time last year, I'd be like, okay, in 2024, Lane Kiffin will have better odds to win the SEC than Alabama. I'd be like, well, what happened to Alabama? What happened in 2023 to where they just fell off of a cliff? That's it's wild times. Very, very wild times in college
yes.
football.
So that's where we're at right now in 2024. Very different world. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.